And take your seats.
He'll just stand for it.
Ah, perfect, yeah.
So maybe the lapels are just maybe you end up losing them there.
Leave that completely to you.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could make your way in. There are plenty of seats out there, so please feel welcome to move to the centre. Or save people from tripping over you as they walk in. I might, can everybody hear me okay? I might have to call everybody to order. Okay, I heard once that, that's right, if somebody puts their hand up in the air, generally people look at you and think you're strange, but it actually does get the audience a little quieter. So, and welcome to World Soil Day. As far as Western Australia is celebrating World Soil Day, it's normally on the 5th of December, but 5th of December lands on a Sunday, and so we decided we'd celebrate it today on the 1st of December. Good morning, I am Tim Overhoy. I am a Principal Research Scientist with the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. I oversee a small team of soil assessors, mappers, data people that are geographically dispersed around the state. I'm based in Albany, but I spend a fair amount of my time promoting my love and passion for soil. Today I'll be walking you through this event, and I do need to cover off on some important matters like the toilets. You would have passed the toilets as you walked in through the front section there. I did ask about emergency. So if there's an emergency, and I love the way they explained it to me, first you'll hear a sound of wah wah. My understanding is that you are to make an orderly exit outside the doors to the oval area to the I'm sure we won't be having that today. Fingers crossed. If you are in need of any assistance, I'm certainly somebody you can come and speak to, so please keep an eye out for those guys. It is my understanding that this is the 7th year that Western Australia has a all-day event. This period is known as Global Soil Week, and Global Soil Week begins from November the 3rd. So Global Soil Week. And we celebrate this because of the significance of soil for life. After all, soil is the production. No soil, no life. Okay. Now I know that everybody here, when they come and sit, they tend to sit parallel alongside friends and colleagues. Soil, as I explained, is important because it is the foundation for life. I'd like you to lean forward to the person in front of you, or perhaps lean back to somebody behind you. Close, so don't get too enthusiastic, but I want you to say the most significant thing that happened to you today about soil. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. Okay. Oh, I'm going to do this. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. You paid attention to what I was saying before about holding my hand in the air, and thank you for that. That's one of the things about soil science and soil activities, the serendipitous discussions that happen across the landscape. And one of the most beneficial things, of course, as you know, and as I cast my eye out here, I know that I can see many colleagues and many people that I've worked with in the past, and serendipitous conversations often create the best projects that develop going forwards. I just want to point out here we have this thing called Slido, and if you've got a mobile phone, take the opportunity to load up the various other bits and pieces in the background, because as we progress through the session, there will be opportunity to raise some of your own questions to the event. Today's event is brought to you by the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, together with partners Soil Science Australia and Soils West. Now, if you become a member of Soil Science Australia, you automatically become a member of the International Union of Soil Science, and that's predominantly what World Soil Day is essentially sanctioned as a day to celebrate soil. But I don't want to steal the thunder of some other people that might speak about that. Look, I do need to advise that there is a slight change in the program. I do regret to inform that we've postponed the proposed launch of the book by Phil Mulvey, Groundbreaking, and we've done that because there's something of greater significance coming. Hold up expecting to see Phil's launch, but you'll have a first priority seat at the face-to-face event next year. With us today, I do need to acknowledge several dignitaries. And later in the morning, we'll have our Minister for Agriculture, Food and Regional Development and Hydrogen Industries, the Honourable Alana McTiernan. She'll join us a little later in the program and give us a ministerial speech. We also acknowledge two Deputy Director Generals from the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, and of course, and a former one, Mark Sweetingham is in the background there, but of course, Heather Brayford, the Deputy Director General for Sustainability and Biosecurity, and the Deputy Director General, winner of the National Soil Health Champion of Australia 2021. Is that right, Lynn? Yeah, I've got a nod. That's good. And a few others, sorry. We have Cecilia McConnell, Cess McConnell, who's the Commissioner of Soil and Land Conservation for Western Australia, Dr. Hayley Norman, Chair of the Soil and Land Conservation Council and Senior Principal Research Scientist with CSIRO, Dr. Carlo Callahan, Chief Executive Officer of Wheatbelt NRM. I also want to acknowledge members past and present of the Soil and Land Conservation Council who may be with us here, and members of the former Soils Ministerial Advisory Committee. We're also grateful to have the wide range of guests and specialists joining us today, and as I said before, it's a great pleasure to me to be able to cast my eye out and see all the people that I've worked with in some capacity or another. And if you don't know me, I'll probably be working with you in the near future. So we've got representatives from DPIRD, Department of Primary Industries. We have Department of Water and Environment and Regulation, university academics, students, researchers from Murdoch and Curtin University, University of Technology of Sydney, Grains Industry Association of WA, CSIRO, Soils West, Soil as well. Anyway, so it's been a little bit of a trend noticing these soil bags landing on my garden patch, and all I can say is that the plot thickens. Dear, sorry. Very bad, very bad. Anyway, now, as we acknowledge the land on which we meet and the Whadjuk Noongar people, I'd like to extend an invitation to Noongar Elder Liz Hayden to welcome us to country. Morning, Liz. Yes.
For an indoor auditorium thing. But anyway, we're here. ngan jinangan niche nonak. Ngan miao karajan nonak niche yagin. Karajan nonak karajan nonak yagin niche nonga buja. Karajan niche kura. Kura ngala kamurt niche yagin pokaja. Pokaja niche kep. Palap yagin. Palap nyin. Palap kit kirajan. Ngala kamurt kunanga kit kirajan. Palap nganin niche yagin nganin. Dat. Marriage. Palap nganin. Ngala kamurt. Palap niche yagin. Niche puja. Yagin. Puja. Palap karajan. Puja. Palap debakan. Debakan kulin. Ngala puja. Karajan. Balapamar, balapajen, karajan, puja. Puja, puja, puja. Nunuk nichi yagan, karajan puja. Nunuk karajan, murit puja. Nunuk karajan, dat, nunuk kulin nichi, ngalaka puja. Kulin. Nunuk mar nichi, karajan. Nichi. Nunga Buddha Karajan. When I think about soil, well, first off, I welcome you to Nyunga country. I say that our people roam this land. They sat on that river over there, and their children played and laughed along with their mothers and their fathers and their families. They laughed and they ate and they loved and they just lived on this river. As well as other places. Who comes from country? Any of you out bush come from country way? Are you all city goers? Oh, well, not many country people. I'm an ex-country person. When you talk about soil, I mean, I would imagine there'd be a lot of farmers here sitting down. But anyway, welcome here today. It's really, I think sometimes about welcoming people to country when they're standing on concrete, because you really can't feel the country when you're standing on concrete. And so many, you city slickers who are here, you're always on concrete. And when you go for your bushwalks, you're in soles. You know, you got shoes on. I don't know how many of you really feel the earth. How many of you let the earth speak to you? How many of you allow the land with its soil to come up through your feet and make you feel a part of the land? That's what needs to happen. And then you'll love the soil. And when I think of the soil, I can't think of nothing but farmers. What farmers are you thinking about? You're thinking about the white colonialists, aren't you? Well, before they come, there were black people on this land who managed this land and kept this land and preserved this land, lived on the land, farmed this land, ate off of this land. And then the farmers came. And you know, I'm proud that my parents, my father, my grandfathers, they were a part of working on this land, cutting down trees, which I hate, you know. We've got the people hugging trees now. Don't cut the tree down because we need them all. But in those days, there had to be a time when trees had to be cut. Well, needed to cut the trees down to start the land. And as I really laid in my bed last night, kind of tormented by this, and I was really tormented, I really was. I was in a conflict when I thought about the farmers. And you know, there's three things that came to my mind about the farmers. The black farmers and the white farmers. But especially white farmers. I can be politically correct and say white Australian people, but I'm just talking black and white now. So when they worked that farm, there was blood, there was sweat, and there were prayers. A farmer had those three components in his life, or in the wife of the farmer as well. Blood, sweat, and prayers. So, so important. And you know, today, that's been removed from Australia. Those three elements aren't that important. Blood's taken over by tractors, sweat. You know, you're in air-conditioned tractors now, combines and whatever those things are. And prayers, well, went out the door a long time ago. So Australia needs to come back to blood, sweat and prayers. And then you can talk about soil, because the soil will then be regenerated. And so many of you, so many Australians have walked away from what it meant in those early days, blood, sweat and prayers. I knew a lot of farmers, and there were a lot of farmers even after I left that town who I'd got to know. They always attended the little local church. The little local church that's dying out now. You think that's not important in this country? To me it is. To me it is. Blood, sweat and tears will regenerate this land. You talk about soil? You know, I was going to bring some soil in here and let it run through my hands, because I love the feel of soil. I do sand tray therapy with people. But we need to run the soil through our hands. Not the soil that's full of all the materials that you need to make it really, really good and beautiful and production soil, but the simple plain earth that you can pick up from your backyard and run it through your fingers. So important. So important. So today, as you talk about soil, improving the soil, the conditions of our soil systems, think about those old people in the old days. Blood, sweat and prayers. So important. There were tears there too. And many farmers paid the price with their lives because of what was happening on the land. So let's not get too far away from the past. The present is a wonderful place to be, but let's not forget the past of what this land was like. It was a beautiful country, still is a beautiful country. And I don't know what problems you're going to solve today. I'm sure you've got wonderful ideas to solve the soil problem. But I hope you remember blood, sweat and prayers. I'm sorry it's only a short one, but I do again welcome you to the country. Ngan kada jeni jenunu kamial, jenangan ngan ni tiyagin nat ngan wangin nat nunuk jenangan nat. When you nunuk jen kulin buruan, when you nunuk jen buruan kulin. I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, and you're wondering what I'm saying, and I'm wondering what are you thinking, and I'm thinking, where are your feet going to take you soon? Where will your feet take you? I like your hat, lady. You look a real bushwoman. Maybe it's just an illusion. But we do live with illusions. But the reality is, I come back, blood, sweat and prayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liz. And so true, walking through country and feeling it underfoot. A few years back I did a little video presentation about the terroir of soil, which is actually to smell it as well. And Buja, mother, country, land, soil. It's the stories that we tell and the stories that we share, and that's what we're doing here today. So many, many thanks. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to the forum our first speaker for this morning, Dr. Carl O'Callaghan. Dr. Carl was the recently appointed Chief Executive Officer for Wheatbelt NRM. He was, of course, known to many as the former Commissioner for the Western Australian Police, with a number of awards and credentials that sit behind that. He has an extreme passion for the environment. The WA Wheatbelt covers a significant area of Western Australia. I think it's about the size of Tasmania, possibly. And the things I enjoyed reading about Carl's background was an interest in being a DJ, as well as forming a rock band, which I think is very appropriate to Saul. So welcome up, Carl. I'll hand over to you to... Thank you.
We have a video, I think. I'm just going to try and get that up and running for you.
Do you want me to put that on now?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I've been on my home farm since I was born and been farming it actively for about 30 odd years, with some help from my parents and brother and partners, obviously. Yeah, I'm pretty chuffed with being nominated by my son, who's involved with, heavily with what we do. The more we learn, the more he learns, the better off he's going to be in the future. I think it's very important to get him on the right track and show him the way, show him what we should be doing and let them follow for a start, and hopefully one day, sooner than later, they'll take over and that'll be the next story, I guess. Since coming here to east of Brookton, which is my Uncle Colin's farm, we have different soil types, we have a different environment, and that's driven me to find out more about how to farm these different soil types. I think the most important thing about the soil health, getting it right in our operation, is management. It all keeps coming back to management, doing it right, doing it wrong. The biggest constraint that we have is our soil. There's a number of issues that I guess we need to deal with, and everybody's in the same boat. We all have soil constraints, but I think addressing those constraints is where our biggest bang for our buck is. For us on this leased country east of Brookton, it's been a very big learning curve with the differing soil types to what we're used to west of Pingelly, and we're learning a lot very, very quickly. A lot of the neighbours are looking over the fence to see what we're doing too. We get a lot of information from each other, which is great. We're trialling a few things. We're digging a few holes and having a look around and tearing a bit of dirt up and watching how it responds to what we do to it. This is a spot that we identified as non-wetting sand, and we just tried to do a little bit about it. We delved it to about 800, a lot of horsepower required and traction. We've only done a few hectares just to see what sort of happens here, how it's going to respond to the delving and spading. We spaded it straight after, and as you can see, we've got a response. There's moisture, shallower moisture where we have done the treatment compared to where we haven't done it, and you can see that with the amount of greenery around. Our plan for the future is to plant more saltbush in these saline areas just to get something productive growing on them and producing more meat and wool fibre. We haven't had any significant rainfall since September. Our plan hopefully is to establish a lot more hectares of saltbush with other varieties of pasture in between them so that the sheep get an array of nutrients, I suppose. And there is a symbiotic relationship between the pastures that are growing between the shrubs and the shrubs, helping each other out, and very beneficial for the animal health. We've let them into this area. It's only a few hectares, but they have come through and picked off all the regrowth from last year. And I locked the sheep out of here about 10 days ago, and there's new shoots establishing on the saltbush at the minute. So it's just an indication of these shrubs with their roots down into the water table and actively growing during the summer without much rainfall. It's very easy nowadays to research whatever you like, and I do that a lot, and I watch a lot of videos on soil health and ways to correct some of the constraints and try and implement them into practice here. I don't think I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing it for my children who have an interest in farming long term. If we can change things around a little bit to make it more productive for them and our neighbours and everybody, then it's all good. I've always loved to learn and always loved what I do.
Just by way of explanation, all the NRMs do call for soil champions every year so that we can work with farmers and assist them to do some of these trials and try things that are new and different. And it's what we're all about. It's about working with community and it's about working with farmers. You heard my background, and I think when I went for the interview, they said, "What do you know about soil?" I said, "Look, I've spent 43 years either sifting through soil or supervising people to sift through soil to look for clues for crimes." So we all come at soil a little bit differently, but I'm looking at soil quite differently today to how I might have looked at it a few years ago. And it does give me great pleasure to be here as part of World Soil Day, and I think it's reasonable to say that the challenges currently facing our ag sector are unprecedented. Changes in our climate and are bringing more frequent extreme weather events that we've seen, particularly in the eastern Wheatbelt. It's tough out there. Cropping is predicted to become increasingly marginal, and that will force systems-based changes on farmers. They'll have to make choices about changing the system. Consumer markets are also changing. The world is demanding more accountability around where food comes from, how it's produced, and the use of agricultural chemicals, for argument's sake, is under the spotlight. As is traceability and transparency, and the pressure is on to reduce emissions and sequester carbon. The region covered by Wheatbelt NRM, you heard that it's a large region. It's actually 12 million hectares of some of the nation's, I think the nation's most important export grain producing country. The economy and the health of our regional towns and communities depend upon the success of our agricultural industry. And at Wheatbelt NRM, we believe that to adapt, we will need to have resilient people and resilient soil, so we need both things to work. The term resilience seems to be getting a great deal of attention these days among government policy makers, academia, and the broader community, but what does it really mean? And I believe the answer to all things in life can be found in one book, and it was written about 80 years ago by a guy called J.R.R. Tolkien. It's called The Lord of the Rings, and there's a reference in that particular book to every possible question you can imagine in life, including soil health. And some of it is sort of so relevant that you think that J.R.R. Tolkien might have known about the Wheatbelt when he wrote Lord of the Rings. In fact, if you look at the movies, some of it looks like the Wheatbelt, doesn't it? Gandalf the Wizard, in an exchange with Frodo the Hobbit, comes frighteningly close to our Wheatbelt reality. He says to Frodo, "It is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the benefit of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have a clean earth to till. What weather they shall have is not ours to rule," which is exactly what I've been saying about the Wheatbelt. Now, Gandalf, his evil was Lord Sauron. It's not quite what we're dealing with, but the quote has a disturbing ring about it, you know, when you think about soil in the Wheatbelt: clean earth, resilient soil. So what is resilient soil? I'm sure all of you here could spend a great deal of time going on to Google and working that out, but resilient soil is one that is able to respond and regenerate quickly in the event of a disturbance. And if we look back at a moment, just for a moment, at 2021, for argument's sake, we had a significant summer rain event at the beginning of the year that had farmers in the fields spraying weeds in March, with some areas reporting the emergence of weeds that they hadn't seen for 10 years. We then get a great growing season, a lot of rain, beautiful growing season, bumper crop, and we get to October and parts of the Wheatbelt have a devastating frost. And we've experienced a number of other late rain events as well, which also have affected harvesting, hay, and a whole range of things. Disturbance is what we are dealing with in the Wheatbelt. Disturbance is what everybody deals with. Remember Gandalf, he says, "It's not our part to master all the tides of the world." If that is indeed the case, then we want soils that can capitalise on unexpected opportunities and recover quickly from detrimental events. then it follows that building soil resilience is where we need to be. And so Wheatbelt NRM's strategy, its overarching strategy, is to empower the people of the Wheatbelt to make positive changes in their local environment and create a legacy of positive action. And that's really what we are about, creating that legacy. We're not there to do it. We're there to create the legacy that farmers will continue with. And in the sustainable ag space, of course, that means working alongside of farmers. And we've asked farmers about a range of things, about their future, their motivations, their fears. And what struck me when we asked the question of farmers about what they thought, their most important ambition, the overwhelming majority said to leave the land in better condition than when they inherited it. We just saw Kane Page say the same thing on that video about leaving the land in a better situation, in a better condition for his kids and us for a whole generation. The Wheatbelt NRM is currently focusing its energies building soil resilience through strategies to help farmers maintain ground cover, create diversity in on-farm vegetation, build soil carbon, and maximise the benefits of soil biota. We have a number of projects underpinning these priorities, including the optimising fodder options in mixed farming systems, building dung beetle highways, and a recently concluded composted chicken manure trial. Our biennial conference, Talkin' Soil Health, and that's talking without the G, it's got just an apostrophe, because it's sort of a bit cool to say talkin' rather than talking, is celebrating a decade of delivering the state's largest soil health conference with the theme Building Resilience from the Subsoil Up. And it was our focus on resilience that made us successful in getting the funding for this particular program and next year's conference from the Commonwealth Future Drought Funds Network. So put it in your diary, and it's on the 17th and 18th of March 2022, and it's in York. Talkin' Soil Health. You can go on the net, you can register, we'd love to see you there. Earlier, I mentioned that adapting to our changing environment would require not only resilient soils, but also resilient people and agricultural communities who can work together to find innovative solutions for the complex problems that we face. Having diversity in the farm's productivity targets helps mitigate risk in our grain-producing region. To that end, we support farmers to explore new and emerging financial opportunities in the carbon and natural capital accounting markets, as well as finding other ways to profit from unproductive or marginal cropping land. We recently partnered with Murdoch University, Facey Group, the CFIG in an application to the Future Carbon Fund to investigate whether saltbush, and we saw some of that up there, has the potential to become an approved methodology under the Emissions Reduction Fund. So imagine a world where farmers might obtain carbon income from plants that are also helping to mitigate salinity, support native fauna, and possibly even be filling summer feed gaps for livestock. That's a win-win situation. And I can tell you the salinity problem is still there. It hasn't gone away, even though not everyone has been focusing on it. Just went with some of the people in this room on a tour of the Wheatbelt recently to see what we call new salinity and new problems facing farmers out there. Wheatbelt NRM has always understood that caring for country requires the effort of so many, and so we have always sought to be a catalyst for community action. No one can achieve it alone, so we need to work in partnership. That's what we're here for. To that end, we are pleased to be members of the Soil CRC and the newly established Drought Hub. The Soil CRC has given Wheatbelt NRM a seat at the table of many of the nation's finest soil scientists investigating cutting-edge advances in soil health. We are currently in the final stages of project partnering with Soils for Life, the South Australian Ag Department, PIRSA, and Landcare New Zealand. The project paired regenerative agricultural properties with paired conventional sites, and the aim to investigate whether carbon is functioning differently between different systems. We hope to see increased microbial activity in the regenerative systems and gain some insight into the forces at work when microbes and fungi are actively encouraged. The regen farmers participating in the study were Stuart McAlpine, Nick Kelly and Gary Page. The results of this project are currently under analysis, and we will report on that at the Talkin' Soil Health Conference in March next year. The Drought Hub based in Merredin is also an exciting new partnership. We're very pleased that it's based in Merredin in the middle of the drylands. And we hope that'll provide further opportunities for us to support farmers and to work together. And the Hub is expected to present their priorities at Talk in Soil Health next year as well. And we look forward to building a productive relationship with the newly formed team. I just mentioned another partnership of note, and that's with UWA. And we are currently wrapping up a project. Some of the people in this room have been to a presentation on this already, but a PhD student, Dr. Jolene Otway, built a modelling tool capable of estimating soil carbon in the southwest of WA with tremendous accuracy at the paddock level. It's called Swarm. The Wheatbelt Development Commission offered us some funds to take this tool out of the hallowed halls of academia and into the world of farmers and carbon market players. The tool's publicly available if you want to seek it out and can be used at no charge by anyone who wants to use it, wants to play around with it and have a look at what it can do. Jolene has been contacted by a number of people who want to secure her services for potential carbon projects. And we hope ultimately that Jolene will be able to attract funds and to extend the tool through WA and perhaps even beyond that. It's a very exciting time to be working in soil health. We have the nation's first soil strategy currently being rolled out, the Drought Fund, our own state strategy, soon to be released, the Hub, the CRC, and then there's the rapidly emerging carbon market. So there is a lot going on in the space, and I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about that today. I began this speech by saying that farmers are facing unprecedented challenges, but I'm constantly in awe about the innovation they demonstrate. Saw Kane Page up there, the things that they want to do, the things that they want to change, the ideas that they want to try. And that's really important. And I believe they will not only prevail, but they will thrive and continue to provide quality food for the world, for all the world, for us and for all the world. Can I go back to Gandalf the Wizard? He said, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. Thank you for your time this morning. I can take some questions, and I have my soil expert with me, Felicity, who works on these things for Wheatbelt NRM. So if you've got questions specific to that, have we got time? A couple of questions. I'll get Felicity to come up with you if we have them and respond to those.
No questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. And you are absolutely right. It's an exciting time to be involved in soils and soil activity, and there's a lot happening in this space at the moment, and suitably so to have that level of recognition nationally as well as locally within our state. I'd like to welcome and bring forward Heather Brayford. Heather Brayford is the Deputy Director General for Sustainability and Biosecurity. Heather, with more than 30 years of experience in fisheries and aquaculture, public policy, regulation, biosecurity and natural resource management, Heather thrives on ensuring that the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development continues to be a leader in the natural resource management sector. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you all for coming today during what is Global Soil Week to recognise the vital role soil plays in the healthy functioning of our ecosystems and food production systems, and to celebrate the achievements Western Australia has made in this space. As Tim said, my name is Heather Brayford. I am the DDG of Sustainability and Biosecurity in the department, so it's really fitting that I'm here today to really celebrate with you the importance of soil and soil health in all that we do in the agriculture and in the regions. My most important job today, though, is to introduce the Honourable Alana McTiernan, MLC, Minister for Regional Development, Agriculture and Food, Hydrogen Industry. The Minister has been a tireless champion of Western Australian soils in raising the profile and importance of the stewardship of our soil resources. The Minister also took the lead in reinvigorating the Soil and Land Conservation Council as the key advisory body to government, and I think that speaks volumes for the commitment of this government and the Minister to soil health in Western Australia. I also know the Minister is a very strong supporter of R&D in soils and particularly innovation. So I'm delighted to be able to invite the Minister to speak to us today during Global Soil Week. Thank you, Minister.
Thanks so much, Heather, and fantastic to be here on the banks of the Derbyl Yerrigan, and always acknowledging that fabulous Nyungar culture that still is so strong part of us today. I believe Lynette has gone. Can I acknowledge Emeritus Professor Lynette Abbott? Lynette, you from UWA, you've obviously been such a leading force in advanced practice here in soil health, and we're really pleased to have you here. Can I, of course, also acknowledge Dr. Hayley Norman, who is Senior Principal Research Scientist at CSIRO, and who so kindly has agreed to take on the chair of the Soil and Land Conservation Council. Hayley has just been doing extraordinary work, and said to Hayley, come round to my place and you can see all the Anemika is actually surviving on my front bush. Sheep's in soon to chomp it up and get nice and fat, but great work. To Associate Professor Frances Hoyle now from Murdoch University, a leading researcher in this area, to Carl Binning and Heather Brayford, senior representatives here from DPIRD, to our Soil Commissioner, Cess McConnell. Great to have you on board, and to Dr. Sweetingham. Where's Dr. S? I believe he's here somewhere. And of course to Carl O'Callaghan in his new role that he's doing so well as the CEO of Wheatbelt NRM. Now, I've actually never read Lord of the Rings, but I was intrigued by many of the insights and the wisdom that you have been garnering, Carl, from that. And certainly I think your last bit, which was all about we have actually got to choose those things we do, and I find that is really important organising principle, because there are so many things that you can do. You've really got to choose those things to invest your finite capabilities in order to achieve change. And I have no doubt that a focus on soil and soil biology is one of those things that absolutely is so fundamental that we do need to make that part of our major focus. Now, I would also say, though, Carl, in relation to the discussion of climate, and I was trying to get it all down, ours is not to rule. I do think that there is more that we are not just passive recipients of the weather. We are not just passive recipients of the climate. I think we do understand that at a global level, that human beings through their endeavours, good and bad, have changed the climate. But we also believe, and I think there is much more focus has to be given on what are the climatic changes that have occurred at a more local level by our land clearing practices, and is there a body of evidence that really says to us that what we have done, much of the change that has gone in the South West Land Division has been the result of land clearing. And can we make a very significant change to our local climate by restoring some of the small water cycle? Will we be able to replicate on this side of the dog fence the sorts of things that we see happening on the uncleared side of the dog fence? But I think, so it is possible that maybe we can look after, we can be affecting some of those bigger things as well. Now, the last World Soils Day event I went to was a very significant one to me, because I came across two fantastic farmers that presented at that conference. And one was Dean Ryan from an old potato growing family down in Manjimup, Pemberton. And Dean, who was has developed an enormous and very deep interest in regenerative farming, and has read deeply, has been doing, and I think with the ably assisted by, I think, our soil scientist down in Manjimup, has been doing some extraordinary work in terms of developing that soil biology. And I got a very sort of excited text from Dean over the weekend talking about he has been working on a nutricarbon fermented compost comprising of crush rock, mine tailings, probiotics and straw. He says the A to Z of elements on the periodic table, and he is developing a soil biology, and he recently had a range of tests come back from Microbiology Labs Australia that is showing that his microbial and fungal activity on those results is off the charts, that the biomass of all beneficial microbe groups were excellent. Now, of course, then that is feeding in to the quality of what he is growing. He is showing that he has, for his avocados, he is getting, and other crops, he's getting extended shelf life, that his pest and disease rates in his avocados have reduced quite considerably as the BRICS levels have gone up, and that this is the low cost of production of that compost really is holding out, great improvement for his bottom line, minimising the need for expensive inputs, minimising the need of nitrogenous fertilisers, which we all know are now prices are going through the roofs, minimising the cost of inputs by way of pesticides. And the other farmer that was equally fabulous at that last World Soil Day event was Brendan Savage, a broadacre farmer from Coolin, again, not a tree change hippie from Gidgegannup doing goats, but a serious dude doing broadacre farming. And Brendan has just been, he really has really combined the best of conventional and sustainable farming practices. Again, he has been massively able to reduce the level of nitrogenous fertiliser. The industry benchmark, he tells us, for nitrogen sits at about 40 to 70 units, whereas most of Brendan's farm was seeded with less than 7 units of synthetic nitrogen. So he's taking a very pragmatic approach, but really has been, and bringing, by being very creative with the cropping and sheep, he has been able to really improve his economic outcome, and he's and I just think you have events like this where you share that knowledge, and certainly that has been really important for us to just be understanding how farmers, practical farmers out there, are using this knowledge and actually developing a very practical response. And a lot of our research has to be looking at what farmers in the field are doing. Now, my task here today, my official task, is to launch our very fabulous WA soil health strategy that our team, led by Commissioner Seth McConnell, have put together. And I think this Seth will talk us through the strategy, but we absolutely understand that it's not just a cliche, it is really so true that the soil is obviously the whole basis for farming, and this soil strategy really is focusing on the importance of natural capital, the opportunity to mitigate climate change, improving productivity through increased soil, organic matter and biology, along with understanding and developing new land management practices. So we have to be really looking at how this whole biological system works as a whole. Obviously, healthy soils are going to contribute to food security, environmental sustainability and climate change mitigation. And we are very conscious that every industry, including agriculture, is being called to account on their carbon emissions and their carbon footprint. And just at the most simple level, looking at the carbon footprint of much of the nitrogenous fertilisers. We did announce last night we put a bill through Parliament to aid a new fertiliser production facility in Western Australia that is actually going to see that the carbon footprint be the lowest carbon footprint urea provider. But you look at the carbon footprint, much of the urea produced from coal-fired power stations in China and travelling lots of miles. So we've got to be looking at how we source a better product, but how we also reduce that amount of that product. And of course, we know, as I said, food, another ESG principle is this whole issue of food waste. If we are producing food that has a better shelf life, that has more capacity for integrated pest management, we start achieving more of the goals that the market is setting us. And it is the market that is telling us increasingly over time that they will be looking at the use of pesticides, and they will be looking at our carbon footprint. So we need to make sure that we have got the best possible understanding of natural capital and the biological systems that we have. So we also, of course, part of the work that we need to do is working on how we can what is the potential for sequestering carbon in the soil. And we know at the Paris Climate Initiative, there was a program that said 0.4% per annum increase in soil carbon could deal with about 25% of anthropomorphic emissions. Now, there is a great deal that we don't understand about whether or not how achievable this is in Western Australian agricultural soils. But I think we have to open our mind to the potential, and much of the work that we want to do is not just to accept a conventional wisdom that it can't be done, but to be looking at those farmers that are saying that they are doing it, they are achieving it, and working on building the scientific evidence that will tell us. So I think the really important thing, and I hope in this strategy that we're seeing, is a preparedness, not just to be looking on the conventional tram tracks, but keep our eyes open to what is happening in the field, and not explaining this away as somehow or other inconsistent data, but look at what the possibilities might be. I think it's a really exciting time to do that. And of course, we've got our carbon farming and land restoration program, where we are incentivising, offering to purchase right up front carbon credits for farmers in the low rainfall areas that want to enhance soil carbon, and so we're sort of de-risking this, and this is part of really a research, and I think a very cost-effective research mechanism to see to what extent we can do that. And that is in addition, obviously, to the other part which applies right across the Southwest Land Division, which is the strategic biodiversity tree planting incentives. Now, we've been very clear. The carbon credits, from our point of view, is a bit of a Trojan horse. What we're really interested, we think there's going to be great farm productivity benefits from both of those, from both development of soil organic matter, that both of those things can lead to a more sustainable and more productive farming practice, and one that equips us well to be producing food in a manner that is going to meet the increasing around that food. But the carbon farming, if that is if the development and the ability to hold ACCUs is something that is valuable for farmers, well, we're prepared to use that. We've also have a $15 million climate resilience fund, and we have been working on soil masterclasses, again focusing on those areas that are most at risk at the Eastern Wheatbelt. So we've had these classes at Northampton, Beacon and Salmon-Gums, and we're really wanting to work with grower groups and farmers to make sure that we get the best practice and the latest thinking, particularly around this understanding of the depth of the biological system and what can be achieved through developing our soils and the biology of our soils. And there's exciting things that we come across all of the time. And Carl, you referred to, the work that Hayley and others are doing, how we can, and we fully support that. Interestingly, we came across at UWA here recently at the PhD pitches, or early postdoc, I think, pitches, with a UWA young scientist who has identified a particular fungi that lives in the Jarrah forest, which can be reproduced in a cost-effective way, used to inoculate crops, and to really, it appears, to really be getting some very real and substantial productivity benefits for farmers. So there's lots of exciting areas to work on, and I thank all the team for developing this strategy, but indicate that we absolutely want to work with the farming community, the research community, to make sure that we drive home every possible opportunity we have here to make our soils more alive, and to make our farming really thrive in this changing environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're going to have a bit of an opportunity now for a bit of a Q&A type sort of panel, and so I'm going to invite Cess McConnell, who is the Commissioner for Soil and Land Conservation. Cess brings a wealth of experience as she has a qualification in geomorphology, and she's been roving around the state. She was in Esperance yesterday and the rangelands the day before. So I'd like to ask Cess to join us here on the chairs. Minister McTiernan, would you like to also join the panel? And Dr. Hayley Norman, who's taken on recently the role of Chair of the Soil and Land Conservation Council. Now, I'm not going to be the driver of the Slido presentation up the top there, so I'm not sure if you have questions in the background, but I will open the floor for some questions, but I do have some just in case in the background as well. So I'll open the floor. Are there any questions that you would like to direct at any member of the panel before us at the moment? Thank you. Just make sure you please announce your name and where you're from.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, look, I'm Peter Weatherly. I'm with the Avon Valley Environmental Society in Northam. Hello, Cess. What my question is, when I look down the road in Northam towards Gamelin, there's a farmer on the corner of the Southern Brook Road and the Gamelin Road, and he's a chemical farmer. And the reality is, every year I keep watching his crop and I say he's going to wear out and he's not going to get good crops much longer. But every year he proves me wrong. And he does get good crops and he's very rich and he's doing extremely well. But even though I keep thinking, my instinct tells me that you've got to go organic and all the rest of it. And would you like to comment, please?
Well, can I just, I mean...
Yes.
Yeah, I certainly find, you know, if I'm sitting around with a bunch of farmers from Three Springs talking about this stuff, they say, Pet, you know, I don't know what you're talking about. We're making great money, and so we just don't see any reason to change. So that's and that does exist. But I think there's a couple of things. So we've got to understand that there are shifts going on in the market. Already with CBH, for example, I think it's about 20% of the crop is actually segmented for, you know, crop that can verify certain ESG standards, a lot of them around the use of chemicals. And that is particularly important, I think, in some of the Asian markets. So the markets are moving. There is also, we're seeing now, like with fertiliser costs, just, you know, how those cost inputs are working. And what we're seeing is both of these farmers that I spoke about today, that I met at the last one of these events, both argue really strongly, as do many of those, that they are making more money, that by engaging in these practices, that they are now more profitable and enjoying their farming more and making more money than they would otherwise. So, and then we've also got to look at the fact that the climate is changing and some of these things will become increasingly more difficult. But I think that's what I see the answer to that is.
Thanks. Peter, I guess I'd add to that. From my experience with farmers now, they're using their chemicals really judiciously. They're not just putting them on haphazardly, and will put them on to the least amount that they can. There's a really big breadth then in terms of applying that from no pesticide right through to obviously some at the extreme, but the vast majority are sitting in the middle. So we're learning a lot about not only the makeup of those pesticides, but what they do both from an environmental point of view and a crop point of view. The Minister's also mentioned markets. Markets are going to become a really big driver in terms of our product, and that will contribute to our use of chemicals down the track. So, yeah. Anything?
I'll just add one more thing, is the second goal of the strategy is rigorous scientific and economic assessment of new and existing farming systems. So I think it's really important that we work together to understand why people are doing particular things and where the opportunities are, and that needs to come from a farming systems perspective.
Tim, maybe I can just break in here.
Yeah,
You haven't actually seen the strategy, so it's pretty hard for you guys sitting in the audience here to go, what's in it? So I'll just give you a bit of a rundown on the 5 core areas that are in it. Will be available on our website directly after today. But look, the first area, or our first goal, is around fit-for-purpose soil health practices. We want practices that value our environment, value our soil, make sure that our resource that underpins that production is there for the future, and we understand the risk about those practices. So that's that first goal area. As Haley's just mentioned, the second one's about looking at those new and emerging systems. What is it that we can learn from the guys that are on the edge there and trialling new things that we can bring back into our production systems in the mainstream arena? So we really want to be in that space. We also need to know about the condition of our soil and how it's changing. How is it responding to those practices? We know that DPIRD over a long period of time, the NRMs over a long period of time have monitored different aspects of our soils. So we want to actually make sure that what we're monitoring tells us about what that soil health is and how it's changing, hopefully positively. We want to make sure that the policy that we do as government supports our farmers, supports maintaining that soil resource. Most of you, I hope, are aware of the Soil and Land Conservation Act. I'll do a plug for that, being its commissioner. But that's about keeping our soils there for the future. So this is also about making sure that the policies, the contemporary policies we use as government. And lastly, it's about conserving soil and landscapes for future growth. We know that competing land uses are increasingly putting pressure on our soils. We might want some soils for lime, and we might want some soils for biodiversity. How do we bring those issues together? So that goal's all about continuing to explore that space and looking at some of those trade-offs and how we do those in an appropriate way. That's the quick nutshell overview of the strategy, just so that you've had a quick understanding of what's in it. But I would say just definitely go to the website as soon as you've got home today and download it, have a read. We'd be keen to hear your feedback. The strategy had extensive industry and farmer consultation, so we believe we've got some pretty good input into its development, but we'd certainly welcome any further commentary on it.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gulliver, yes, thank you.
Hello, I'm Andy Gulliver from private industry with a business called Seawise. In response to the first question, Sess made a good point that farmers have learnt how to judiciously use the wise use of chemicals and fertilisers. We're finding that soil organic matter, soil carbon is becoming a fashionable topic of conversation. What are we doing in our technical agencies to actually ensure that we understand the form and function of soil carbon in the same way as we now understand the form and function of fertilisers and chemicals? How do we make sure that we actually understand carbon and that we can use it wisely in the future?
Well, I'll get Sess and Haley to comment too, but certainly I think that we do need to have a more rigorous scientific endeavour in this regard. Now, we did start some years ago some regen trials out at Merredin. It was part of the revival of the Merredin Dryland Research Institute. And those trials are ongoing, and the idea is to do some longitudinal trials. We were also supposed to be doing, and hopefully we'll get on top of that, actually looking at what farmers are doing and doing those field trials so that we can actually, field studies, so we can see what has happened. And another important thing that has come out of many conferences that we've had and we're trying to pull together is that there is, somewhere or other in the bowels of the department, there is actually, we've got to really bring that data to the fore. And so part of both in our land restoration fund, and I think Carl referenced it in his thing, in the future carbon fund, we are recognising we need to do more research. And part of the problem is that there's not any big multinational companies that are necessarily going out there and funding the research. And we've got to try to get entities like GRDC, who quite happily fund Bayer to the tune of $37 million a year, to actually be also putting some money into this sort of research, because it is a problem that the scientific wraparound, I think that was one of the things that Cess and Hayley are very keen to do, is to make sure that we've got, you know, some proper empirical science to wrap around this stuff.
Do you want to go first? Well, I was actually going to ask Tim to comment on this, because there's wiser heads than me here. I have a geomorphological background, sorry, that didn't come out right. But we have a range of programs, as the Minister's just said, from the department's point of view, particularly in the climate resilience space, which is also looking at soil carbon. But I might ask Tim, and I know that Corinne's here as well, that can give an overview from that project. And then we've also got a few very wise heads sitting within the audience here. But Tim, I'll ask you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Cess. Look, as I said before, I think the times are exciting, and particularly with a lot of what used to be previously novel tech, which is now becoming more readily available. Who would have thought that X-ray or CRT or microfilm type sort of tech would now be commonplace, and is actually, as a medical technology, is now actually being used to examine soils. So under the Department of Primary Industries, there is a $15 million climate research, climate resilience task force. There's also a carbon farming land restoration fund, both $15 million that are being targeted towards implementing on-ground activities and also trialling some novel approaches and nuances in better understanding carbon in the landscape. There's also the national strategy as well. They've put out a package of around about $200 million, and parts of that include aspects related to soil carbon challenges, so it's actually innovation challenge. So the idea there is we'd like to see partnerships develop between the state and the nation. There's also a number of preeminent researchers in the room. Fran, Dan, retired Professor, Emeritus Professor Lynn Abbott, various others here that are also researching. So I think, Andy, to answer your question, I think the world is our oyster, and I think there's some really great stuff that's going to open up in the whole understanding that soil interactivity with the microbiome in the landscape.
And I'll just add to that, Tim, the Council were really keen to see collaborative partnerships to optimise all of these resources, both here in Western Australia and some of the great work that's happening nationally and internationally. So it's really important we work together.
Any further questions there? Yes, next to Ted, sorry.
Oh, sorry, just one question up here. I'll just run up first.
Trumped by Anthony.
I'm Nanthi Bolan from University of Western Australia. I'm new to this place. My question is to the Minister. Minister, I understand you are very passionate about regenerative farming. Fertilizer import is the major contributor to greenhouse gas emission in broadacre, around 52%. Now, farmers understand the value of other nutrient sources, such as compost, and they know the value of that in soil health. But the problem is, it's very expensive to use because of the transport cost. My question to the Minister is, what is the incentives, or do you provide any subsidy for the farmers to use compost and other fertilizers, including the mineral fertilizer you just talked, rock mineral fertilizer you talked about? Thank you.
No, and our preference is not to provide subsidies, because I think, and you would see probably from what's happening in India, if you have a farming model that's based on subsidy, there's a great vulnerability in that. So what we need to do, I see our role is doing the research, the enabling, the product development. Our role is not to subsidise. We want our farmers to be, I think, every strong regenerative farm, you know, people that really know what they're talking about, they say, please do not go down the road of subsidies, because if you can't make this stuff work, it's not going to be a viable solution. And I think in the presentation I made this morning, I was talking about Dean Ryan, and he's saying that he's getting enhanced productivity at lower cost. And you know, what I'm hearing about, and I guess what COVID is showing, is this vulnerability that we've got when we are relying on an overseas product. So importing a nitrogenous fertiliser from China, I mean, everyone is complaining to me about the prices going through the roof. This is not the time to subsidise the alternative. It's the time to really put the research on to show people how you can be less dependent on these international supply lines. So I certainly I don't think that this idea of subsidisation is the right path. I think us actively going out there, providing some initial incentives perhaps by way of purchase of ACCUs is part of what we can do it. But this thing does make sense, and it's got to stack up economically if it is really going to take root.
Okay, to the young lady who's next to Ted Griffin there. Sorry, but...
Young lady, I don't think so. Maria Niermann, my name. I'm a distraught hydrogeologist and disgruntled bone therapist occasionally, but basically a person who's very focused on health. And I was quite pleased to hear soil health and soil resilience, the words today a few times. My question, you mentioned as well that apparently farmers who convert to more regenerative methods also feel they're happier doing their work. So the question basically, is there any initiatives out there that measures farmers' health and farming communities' health in line, in parallel with the improvement or not of the soil health, as in, is a bigger picture approach to the whole thing?
I'm not aware of any formal studies. Certainly some anecdotal ones have supported what you've just said there, that there's a very strong connection between the feeling of well-being and the choice of a farming system. And that has certainly said those farmers feel very satisfied with what they're doing. But I'm not aware of any formal ones. It'll be an interesting study. Fran, you've got a...
Some years back, I was going to say, there was a study that was done through the University of Western Australia. It was for a catchment demonstration initiative for the Fitzgerald area. They undertook the question was, why do farmers invest in soil health practices from a health perspective? And as part of the measure, the fellow who was leading it was a fellow called Dr. Peter Speldewind, and you can probably really look it up. But one of the things they did was they went out and measured the E. coli content from soil dust that's blown off the paddocks. We have a problem of not being able to maintain good ground cover in Western Australia, so we want to be able to reduce wind erosion. Anyway, they did the assessment and discovered that the poor old farmers out at Fitzgerald, their E. coli content was nearly 3 times above the World Health Organisation's, so they breed them tough out at Fitzgerald. It was a good study though, however, and I have not seen it written up, but it was a good link to examine why do farmers invest in soil health, and then looking at that link between personal well-being and investment activity.
Thanks, Tim. I think also through the drought resilience work that was done, and I think colleague Nancy Ganaway, who's in the audience, there's some work that was done on the link between drought and mental health and physical health, and doing some interesting work with the health department, in fact. So it's some work that I think is actually being picked up again as part of the, because drought and climate resilience very much the same thing. Also, I think one of the things we're looking at in terms of a task force is the idea of natural capital accounting. And I think there are lots of different models, but certainly the ones that we're looking at working with Perth NRM and others, is actually looking at those measures as well. So I think from economic measures through to social and wellbeing measures.
Yeah, and can I just add, we certainly, I can anecdotally say, when we, a lot of the younger farmers from farming families that may have married someone from the city, and they come back to the farm because they're really keen on, the farming life and great place to bring up kids, and, a la the Charles Massey story, they start saying they've just got to be spraying all this stuff, and it's this, like, it runs a bit counter to what their notion of what farming should be, and so part of the motivation is wanting to create this environment that is really healthy for their own family. As well as the satisfaction of creating healthy food. So that does, I get that a lot from the young couples that have come back to work on the family farm. There was one other thing, but anyhow, that's, so I think that is, it is an important, sorry, what I was going to say, we also did some research a couple of years ago about what do we need to do to attract high-achieving students into agricultural studies in universities, and there was two things that really were the key selling points, potentially the selling points for agriculture. One was all the magnificent tech opportunities, but the other equally was this idea of contributing to the sustainability of the planet. So it was those two things coming together that presented something that was really interesting about agriculture.
Because I've always get this anecdotal, we have anecdotal, you always get it back in your face, but it's not evidence-based. So it would be kind of...
Well, I think when we've got more farmers on board, we'll do it. We're at this point, as Gandalf or whatever said, or one of those wizards said, you got to keep your, you got to work out what you're going to focus on. That is something perhaps in a few years we can do after we've got more people perhaps doing this.
I'm going to throw the microphone, not literally, but over that way to Jennifer West. So Jennifer, put your hand up so you know how the. Okay, so the microphone has to find its way to there. Oh, now. All right, well, that's easier. Sorry, Jennifer, I'm going to trump you again. Louise Barton, UWA. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I will get the microphone to you. So this morning we've heard a lot about partnerships and the importance of partnerships. I'm a soil scientist, I'm a researcher here at UWA, and I have to say there's many times when I feel the growers are definitely a step ahead of me. And they provide us with a lot of insight, but they're running businesses. So of course they've really got their, they're in the game. My question to the panel is for many years, but are there more opportunities for us to strengthen as researchers, as soil scientists, our relationship with growers? You've all been travelling around the state. I'd like to know if you think there are more opportunities and how your various organisations could maybe facilitate even stronger partnerships and conversations between soil scientists and our growers.
Thanks, Louise. I think some of the best research in terms of soil health and productivity has come where there's been really strong links between researchers and producers. So in answer to your question, we actually need to do more of that. It's a given. I think some things have made this a bit easier. One is the grower groups and the alliance. It's easier for growers to get messages to the research community, I feel, and it makes it easier. As a researcher, you can't work with every single farmer in the Wheatbelt, so it's trying to find the right people to work with who are passionate about particular areas. And I also think the increasing use of technology is going to help to make that a bit easier.
Fantastic.
I was going to say a bit more. Louise, I would say that every time I go out and I'm on ground, I've got questions coming back. People, the passion to learn hasn't changed. The ways we get that information in, I think, need to evolve a little bit as well. We're lucky in the sense of technology is giving us some new tools. Going to the rangeland space, we're looking at satellite imagery and the use of that satellite imagery, but we need to put it back on ground. And so trying to engage our pastoralists in that space so that they've actually got use of that. I'm not sure on new techniques, but I think some of the fundamentals of making sure that growers on ground are included in the discussion and development is really critical for a good outcome.
No, that's fine.
Sorry, Tim, can I just...
Absolutely.
I just need to give a small caveat to an answer I gave before. There is one area where we are offering some financial incentive to try these new soil amendments, and that's in Wanneroo, in the horticultural sector. We're having to cut their water entitlements by 10%. So part of getting people to adjust to this new reality, we are offering some incentives to trial soil amendments, but that's in that very specific circumstance where we've had to cut their water entitlement.
Yeah, hi. Jennifer
Thanks.
West from Carbon West. We're a small carbon consultancy. So I wanted to follow up on the Minister's comment about getting more farmers involved. And so the Carbon Farming and Land Restoration Program is an excellent initiative. And we are involved in helping bring some farmers to the table on that, and they're currently under assessment. My main concern is that the farmers, that program is linked to the Emissions Reduction Fund, the federal program for carbon credit generation. And most of the country's agricultural producers are so busy doing what they do, and there should be more interaction, but they are very busy people, and they don't understand what the Emissions Reduction Fund is and how it works and what is involved in participating in that scheme. So I'm wondering, perhaps, Minister, is there plans to, obviously, yeah, you've got in and got it going, which is awesome, and hopefully we'll get some results out soon, but can we engage farmers somehow in better understanding what the opportunities are in carbon and the commitments required and the obligations under that Emissions Reduction Fund? Because applying for the Carbon Farming and Land Restoration Program was an extremely complicated process, and it asked questions of farmers that there is no way they would be able to answer without support from the carbon industry consultants. So yeah, I just think that the education of farmers around carbon opportunities, which hopefully will lead to some of the broader picture natural capital gains, and carbon's a great place to start. It's not perfect, but we really need to help farmers understand this, what is a currently crazy carbon market.
Yeah, look, can I get your question? Can I say that, you know, there's a bit of a culture war going on. There's certain elements in the farming sector that are dead against carbon farming, and there is, and I do understand some of their concerns, because I think perhaps not everyone that's playing in the field is going to be as virtuous as we first thought they might be, and people are dreading a blue gum reinfestation in over very valuable agricultural land. So there's a bit of a problem there. We do know that say for example, even when you still couldn't do it in Western Australia before we came into government, the carbon aggregators had gone out there and sold the story to the southern rangelands, and we were able to get into government and fight to get the right, and so that happened and it was done. That conversion process was done by the carbon aggregators, who, if they want to have a role, have to actually, that's part of what they do. If they want to get the money, they've got to do that education piece. But we have been going in, as I talked about those programs that we had over, especially for the Eastern Wheatbelt, to really talk about what we were doing. So those soils masterclasses were very much aimed at getting people into the headspace. It is our, and I think we've got agreement on this, that in February we'll go out before the next round opens. We're going to be focusing on February, having more extensive. And again, we want to work with grower groups. We've always put it out to grower groups. Come back to us, and help sponsor. If you've got farmers that are interested in your area, we'll come out and talk with your grower group about how that might happen. So we have been doing some of it. Some of the carbon aggregators have been doing it, and we will have another tilt at this in February. But I think there's got to be, we'd really like there to be some mature conversations about what is going on. And unfortunately, with some of our farming groups, that's proving to be a bit tough.
Thank you. The opportunity for a couple of more questions. I broadcast my eyes across the audience. Excellent, thank you. I was going to... Oh, Damon, I thought you were going to ask a question. Yeah, come on. Yeah.
No.
I will just point out in the colonnade area just outside, we'll have morning tea a little bit later. It's almost late to your lunch, but we'll be doing that out on the lower terrace. But inside that area, there is actually a display of Axis Tech and Sensor C. George Kalis there is very kindly ERA Sustainable. And so you guys wandering out there, please take the opportunity to have a look-see at that activity as well. Well, I'm going to ask a question then. Okay, so the Soil and Land Conservation Council, after a 16-year hiatus, was reinitiated again. Thank you very much to the Minister for kicking that into gear. It's been running for a couple of years now. So I would like to ask either Cess or Hayley, what do you think are the major learnings for the Council in that time over the last couple of years? Hate me because you're put on the spot.
Yeah, I love being put on the spot. First, I'd just like to acknowledge Kevin Goss, who was the first chair when Council reformed, and he's done a great job of pulling Council together. What have we learnt? That's a really good one. It's been an interesting process, taking a document that was largely written by scientists, taking that through an industry consultation phase, and then using that to produce this document. So that's been an interesting learning curve. Another interesting has been the tension between issues around carbon and soil health and microbiota, but the other big issues that impact soil, and they include salinity, acidity, soil erosion, and overgrazing and biodiversity. So I think it's important we acknowledge that there's still major issues that we need to consider. I don't know if you've got any thoughts, Seth?
Learnings-wise, I think it's been, just bringing that new technology and then stepping into a new world of particularly soil biology, which is sort of a new frontier for us in terms of the agricultural space. It's exciting, but it's unknown, or largely unknown. And I think the other big change, Tim, is that we're now in an environment where all of the world has thoughts about our environment, about the impacts on our environment, and wants to know about our food and agricultural production. So we're in a really exciting space where not only does those that have got passion for the environment come together, but the rest of our community comes together, and we're all trying to bat for the same thing. So I think from the council now sits in a time which gives us enormous opportunity to make real impact, both for production but also for the environment.
And can I say I've introduced into Parliament some legislation to change the composition of the council, because it was sort of a little antique and very much sort of representative. And so we will now be having a composition that really will be much more based on skills and having a body that can really be providing real direction, I think, on this. And I will say, Cess, I think one of the things that we've seen because both these things came together with the Soil and Land Conservation Council being reconstituted and your position being filled in the way it was originally conceived, we have seen action, and we are seeing, and although most of this is going to be the important educative work, you have been prepared to go out there and put orders on, because we have to know, we are actually serious about this, and not everyone is amenable to the charms of education and reason, and from time to time you have to have that stick, as well as talking nicely to people.
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned that, Minister, about the stick, and I'm going to ask Cess, is the Commissioner going to crack down on inappropriate soil management practices?
I'd have to say yes. But look, the Soil and Land Conservation Act is a really interesting act. It's a two-part act. If you read through it, the first part of the act is all about enabling landholders to understand that soil resource and the practices that impact on it. So that education component is really, really important. But it does have a stick, and it does have the power to require people to look after their land. So this act is there to make sure that the state of WA is there for the state of WA into the future. So yes, we will be cracking down, and we have been cracking down, but first preference is work with people. I'd much rather be doing that together than having to come with a stick.
Yes, Carl. Come grab a microphone or...
I can grab a mic and bring it back. I was just going to ask the panel to briefly reflect on this challenge of new paradigms in science embedding with existing and established practices. So the biological revolution, some would argue, is the next big revolution following on from the communications revolution. We're discovering all sorts of interesting things about gut flora. Gut flora are completely related to what sits in our soils and the food that we eat. And biology is a complex beast. It takes a discipline around a systems analysis, a view around ecology, and collides with our understanding of soil chemistry, soil physics, soil structures. How do we wrestle that new paradigm and engage farmers in the process? I might pass to Hayley first.
Good question to wrap up on.
Well, farming is an evolving practice, and farming has been evolving for 50,000 years or whatever the timeline is. And different people need different levels of evidence, whether it's economic or scientific or from a farming systems, in order to change. So I think it's really important that we work together to gather the evidence and to support that evolution and encourage practice change.
I think I'd pick up your systems comments. I think most farmers have a pretty innate understanding of the system because they operate in it, they respond to it, they live in it. As scientists, we do tend to be quite pigeonholed. So I think chasing that systems discussion and how do things link and what's the consequence of this and what are the trade-offs of those consequences, I think that's, for me, that's the space that's evolving at the moment and where we do need to have those discussions.
And thanks, Carl. And I think what has happened is that there still has been, an element, and it will vary from farmer to farmer, of that still there's that biological paradigm that's still been working there alongside the more industrial paradigm. And so it's not necessarily been one or the other, but certainly what we are seeing now is this increased understanding of just how, just even this integrated pest management, the advantage of actually being able to reduce your pesticides by developing some biological diversity on your property that is going to feed, going to create some predator things that will consume your pests, right? I mean, it's that preparedness. So, to open your mind to it. So I think two things have to happen, is that we have to be, as the department and not playing in the culture war, which is sort of, there's a little bit of what's happening. There's a culture war between those people that want to diss their staff and those that want to embrace it in total. I think when I look at people like Brendan Savage, I sort of see like almost this is the path forward, that this is someone, they're wanting and increasingly learning about the complexity of the system, but they're not abandoning all of the pragmatic use of these things, judicious use of these industrial agents that are helping them, but are open to experimentation and evolving their system. So I think the key thing is not to close our mind. I also think, and it's a challenge, I'm sure, for a lot of researchers for where you get your funding, that the bigger financial interests at the moment are there supporting, supporting, shall we almost say, existing paradigms, because there is not as much money to be made, arguably, by fertiliser and pesticide companies in a regime that is more biologically based. Now, there's probably, and I think Seawise, you're a company out there working in this space. You can see economic opportunities. So hopefully, maybe some of these big companies will start moving genuinely into this space. Sometimes they're moving disingenuinely, where the argument is that they're buying up technology to shut it down, operating like many of the big multinationals have over many centuries. So but the two have existed side by side. We've just got to keep an open mind.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to wrap it up there. And I would like everybody to extend their thanks. We have a very engaged minister, and thank you to the panel, Sess and Hayley, and also the previous speakers. Thank you very much. We are going to break for a late morning tea that will give you the chance to have some more serendipitous discussion out in the tea room on the lower terrace. But don't leave us, because there's more to come. There are some more speakers and cake. We've got the cutting of the world salt cake, and everybody gets a soily cake. Thank you. Come back in about 15 minutes, please. We'll round you up.
Yeah, we're getting total carbon. That's right. So what I'm saying is that we've got a tension of messages between, going up to our board, right? And we probably need to sort of have a
Everybody come and take your seats, please. Yes, I'll tell you the story later, or the last minute. We had a little bit of an attrition rate, so please come in and take your seat so we move on to the next part of the program. Now, we do have the World Soil Day cake, and we have the official cake that we cut, and then of course everybody gets to go away with their own individual soil cupcake. And I wanted to call it a dirty cake, but I was told I wasn't allowed to do that. Having looked at them now, I thought they were cupcakes, but I tell you what, they're like cakes like a muffin, so they'll keep you certainly well fed. We're going to roll in now to the second part of the presentation, and we have a number of speakers ahead of us. And I also just wanted to point out that on the other side of Australia today, also on the 1st of December, they have this group called the Parliamentary Friends of Soils. And so they are also celebrating World Soil Day today in Canberra. And the Honourable Penelope Wensley, who is the National Advocate for Soils, she was appointed to the role in 2020 at the Bush Summit. She, of course, succeeded the Honourable Michael Jeffries, the late Michael Jeffries, who is the inaugural advocate for soils in Australia. It's an amazing outcome because it's a bipartisan role that's supported both by both camps, so both by the Liberal and National Coalition and federal Labor governments, and so it's quite a significant role. Of the other speakers that we will have rolling after a presentation from Penelope. So Penelope is a former public servant, a diplomat who served as the 25th Governor of Queensland from 2008 to 2014. She was the High Commissioner to India from 2001 to 2004 and Ambassador to France. Has held a long and substantial interest and experience in natural resource management, environmental and sustainable development matters. She has been connected to the Crawford Fund. She's also the patron for Soil Science Australia. After that, we will receive a presentation from George Kalis. So George joins us because he's played a key role in establishing a global network of individuals and organisations that are committed to developing more sustainable food and farming systems. Now, George and his family are prominent food producers, and we're very glad to have George part of us because he bridges that gap between, I suppose you could say, urban food consumer and grower, so that rural-urban divide. As an agricultural engineer from Columbia, and so she is currently completing her Master of Science in Dryland Agriculture and Systems at the Curtin University. So we've asked Karina to come and speak to us to give a young person's perspective. I like to think I'm young, but I'm a bit of an old fart now in the scheme of things. But she is representative of youth and what the future holds for soil from her perspective and also from a youthful perspective. So we'll enjoy that. And then we'll wrap up from a presentation from Henry Smolensky. Henry is the current Western Australian President for Soil Science Australia, the WA branch, but also here representing the International Union of Soil Science and the Global Soil Partnership. Henry is a research scientist with the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, and he'll give you a few tips on his interest in black soils and other bits and pieces, I'm sure. No, he tells me he's just going to be talking about Soil Science Australia. So I'm going to, the presentation from Penelope Wensley is a recorded one, and the irony is that what you see here is also being presented to David Littleproud and the politicians over there in Canberra as well. So let me just whip it and get it running.
Thank you for supporting World Soil Day. It's a day to raise awareness for everybody in the community of the importance of soil, to recognise just how fundamentally important it is to preserve life on Earth. Management of our soils, protecting our soils and soil health is going to be one of the keys to addressing the big global challenges of food security and of adapting to a changing climate. The UN summed it up really well when they adopted the resolution establishing World Soil Day. The words were, "Soils constitute the foundation for agricultural development, essential ecosystem function and food security. Soils are a key to sustaining life on Earth." The passion that so many people feel about soils, the gardening community, the farming community, the soil scientists, but I want to see that passion spread further. Thank you for the commitment you have made to celebrate this important day. All of us have a shared responsibility not only to raise awareness of the importance of soils, but to spread the word that this is an absolutely precious, vital, natural asset that we have to maintain and restore, not only for our generation, but for the generations to come.
Quite a lovely presentation there. The members, the Western Australian members on the Parliamentary Friends of Soil is Rick Wilson and Andrew Hastie. Rick Wilson, interestingly, is also the chair for the Agricultural Resources Committee. And so I would encourage you in the Soils fraternity, if you want to get one of those guys alongside, pull them over when you next catch up with them and encourage them to be a part of that network in the soils area. Without further ado, I would like to welcome George Kalis up to the stand and to give us a presentation. And if you've got a program, you know that it's changed around a little bit, and we're sincerely apologising for leaving a little bit later in the day. But please join us here, Kale and George, and we'll. Kale, I know, yeah. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking about the green stuff you eat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Do you want that one? Is it that? Just go next.
Okay, thank you. What a fantastic day to celebrate soil. I've spent 30 years in regenerative agriculture practice in West Australia, and in that time I've seen, according to the Department of Agriculture, $1.6 billion a year of productivity lost every year in the Wheatbelt of Western Australia. And it's a great time for us to change how that whole thing has gone. And I celebrate the Minister's beautiful attitude towards everything. Nothing is impossible for her, and she attacks it with a great deal of vigour that scares me. So I guess the talk today is about soil carbon sensor, data platform for agriculture sustainability, and the food value chain. The companies that are involved that I'll be talking about today are a lot of our family companies. The relationship between the consumer and the farmer has been isolated a long time by agribusiness in between. So the farming people don't see what the consumer thinks at the other end. He just gets this guy come to the front gate and say, it'll cost this much for inputs and I'll give you that much for your product, and that's the end of it. But the consumer has become far more demanding and wants to see a sustainable world to live in. They want to see the soil, the air, the water, everything to be able to support life on Earth. And the farmer's always wanted that, but he's had to contend with a whole lot of interference from the distance between farmer and consumer, which is now broken. That distance is broken. So part of what I represent today is the consumer position of business selling. The idea of sustainable food has become far more attractive today than ever before. The food value chain is really what I'll be discussing, and we have worked a technology framework for farming, food and beverage sustainability. So we have a framework, a digital framework in which we can track provenance from the farm all the way through to consumer, and it's not just a blockchain digital mark which you can track. It is actually granular from farm, granular inside producer, granular all the way through to the actual consumer position. So I hope I don't bore you too much, but I'm pretty excited about this. My first conversation is about Red Rooster. Was started by my father, my brother and myself in 1974. We got to 100 stores, 3,000 plus employees. We began to understand the relationship between consumer and producer. We've always been in primary production, but unless you satisfy the consumer, the next day the sales will show the difference. And we enjoyed a great deal of success in Red Rooster. As I said, we got to a very large number of stores. None of them were franchised, they're all owned by us. But we learnt a lot about consumer sentiment and what consumer preferences were. We also owned 41 Pizza Hut shops in West Australia, and that again, you may think fast food and sustainability isn't hand in hand, but there are lessons to be learnt if you're fighting for a consumer dollar against McDonald's and Hungry Jack's and Kentucky Fried Chicken. You learn what do consumers really want that makes a difference to consumers. The other businesses, I'll have to take some of my notes here. We've been in fisheries since 1926. My grandfather started fisheries here in West Australia, and we're in the wholesale and retail in lots of different areas, including, you'll see on the screen, restaurants, Island Market in Triggs Island, Canteen, Kalis's Restaurant, Shaw House in Nedlands, all sorts of places like that where we have a very smart restaurant, contemporary restaurants today serving a lot of seafood product. Today we have a company called Austral Fisheries, which is in partnership with the biggest Japanese fishing company and one of the biggest companies in the world in fisheries, and operates the only 2 licenses in the Antarctic issued by the federal government for catching the Patagonia toothfish. And that is a very complex ecosystem of fisheries where we're trying to, I can't see you, that's better, where we're trying to to maintain a fisheries with some sort of sustainability, and it's a very complex thing because there are lots of pirates taking the fisheries, there are lots of unknown things about the cycle of fish, etc., about that particular fish species. The Austral Fisheries has been awarded over many years the Marine Stewardship Certification and was the first seafood business in the world to be certified as carbon neutral. We're quite proud of that. My wife's family started, you'll see DeSonia Brothers on the screen. My wife's family owns DeSonia Brothers. It's a large meat-producing, pork-producing small goods factory here and in the eastern states. We're in every Woolworths in the country. And one of the things that's happening in that business is that the last month's governance directive for the company is a 30-page governance directive regarding what consumers will in the future consider to be acceptable and not acceptable in terms of consumers' preferences. It's quite a complex matter to navigate the governance of a company today to meet consumer preferences, and that includes the care of animals. For instance, my wife's family is also major shareholders in Westport, the biggest piggery business in West Australia, and how we treat the pigs and how they are slaughtered, etc., etc. All of these issues become more and more under consumer scrutiny. So we have to manage our businesses in a way which people say they're doing a good job, they're doing a bad job. You can take a hit on profit, but you can't take a hit on your brand. You can be unsuccessful financially for a year and just battle through with loans, etc., etc. But the day someone says that you've got too much glyphosate in your product, or you've got too much of this or too much of that, the next day they don't buy. So this is an important part of the equation, talking about consumer preferences and what they believe is good for their life and their family's life. The next part, let me just see if I can remember to do this. Yes. In 1991, I funded a research company called ERA, Environmentally Responsible Agriculture is the acronym, to conduct sustainable agriculture trials in the WA Wheatbelt. So we've done that for approximately 30 years, and I've spent $20 million of my own money making research that no one else would do. We've done something called radionics, which is radio frequency, to see if that helps grow things. We've done all sorts of stuff that ordinary people would be certified into an insane asylum to try and understand what are we doing wrong in agriculture. And we concluded that business of 30 years of research with a comprehensive data set on 30,000 hectares of trials taken over 4 years, with up to 50% less chemicals used, up to 50% more yield, and up to 29% more carbon. Now that data is on our website, era.ag. This is what ERA's fundamental high yield, soil health, biological fertility, carbon sequestration, reduced chemicals is all about. In the course of our life in agriculture, we owned and operated 2 wineries. We farmed wheat at Muckambuddin. We farmed and owned and operated 19,000 avocado trees, 120,000 vines, and we created the world's biggest vertically integrated olive plantation with 886,000 trees, all based in West Australia, all 100% organic. Part of my story relates to that olive plantation. That olive plantation, the biggest in the world, Regrettably, on the 16th of May this year, my brother passed away from cancer from the times that he spent using, on our other farms, glyphosate in excess. And there'll be people here that support glyphosate on farms, and I understand that totally. You've got to get rid of weeds. But when we sprayed, and you'd come home with the suit on, and you'd have it'd get through the cracks, it'd get into your boots, it gets everywhere. Glyphosate is a dangerous chemical, and if there's any reason for me to be motivated in the morning to get up and talk about sustainability and using less chemicals, the loss of one's younger brother is part of my life story. Next part, did that happen on its own? Wow. My next part of the story is in 2010 I co-founded a charity in the UK and USA called the Sustainable Food Trust, a global voice for sustainable food and health. Our patron is Prince Charles. Our CEO is Patrick Holden, who's ex-CEO of Europe's biggest organic certifier, the Soil Association. Our trustee is Christy Brown, a billionairess who owns Jack Daniel's distilleries worldwide. And another trustee, Thomas Hartung, voted Time magazine one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Thomas serves 45,000 customers organic meals in the EU, making him the biggest by far. So there's some serious people involved in sustainability charity and sustainability initiatives. The reason I mention all of that is not to name drop, but to say that the Sustainable Food Trust is a very serious charity that has had lots of success, and recently we had 10 of our people at COP, where COP had absolutely no agriculture on its agenda at all. It's just remarkable that you could have no agriculture at COP26. But we think because we sent our team there, the next COP27, which is in Egypt, we have lots of friends in Egypt, and we've greased the rails. There will be a lot more agriculture at COP27. Please watch this space. The reason why I'm talking about Sustainable Food Trust is because its current mission is to expand a universal farm measurement known as the Global Farm Metric, with 50 global partners, including farming and environmental groups, certifiers, global food companies, financial services and government. I think there should be something here. Oh, sorry, I missed that bit. That's Sustainable Food Trust and the things we do. One of the things we do, if you can see up there, is the true cost accounting. That term, true cost accounting, was termed by us. We've done papers for the hidden cost of food in the United Kingdom, the hidden cost of food in America and other countries like that, and we've managed to change the agenda of uncosted externalities. Uncosted externalities is the reason we have so much trouble in the world, and taxpayers end up paying for basically subsidised food that goes out that causes a lot of damage to the environment. Moving on from that. Global Farm Metric. So the Global Farm Metric is a whole farm framework for measuring sustainability on all farming systems and landscapes, aligning existing sustainability assessments to establish a common language that enables all stakeholders in food and farming to drive positive change. I don't know if you can make out some of the people here who are our partners, but Tesco, Morrison's, NatWest Bank, Sainsbury's, World Wildlife Fund, these are substantial corporations. We received recently several £million from this group to further our work and expand this Global Farm Metric. Global Farm Metric uses a single set of categories, indicators and measures to assess whole farm sustainability on all farming systems and landscapes, aligning existing assessments to establish a common baseline of data and drive positive change across food and farming sector. It is not another certification, audit or assurance scheme. It is a common framework to be integrated into existing schemes. It is basically agnostic. So you can plug this into any of your existing certifications. The reason why this is so important, why it's gaining so much publicity now, not so much here because we get our news about 5 years later, is that, and the reason I've spent so much of my time overseas and not West Australia, is that amongst those, particularly in Europe, who have suffered enormously pollution and loss of productivity, and they're prepared to do something in those countries now. America less so, but they're slowly changing. Australia less so because we're the lucky country, but Europe has been at the forefront of making change in agriculture. And the next point in my journey will be to describe a sensor. This is all leading somewhere. I'll get there in a minute. Can you hear me? All right? Yeah. So sensor C is a carbon sensor that detects in field, on demand, to 95% accuracy of the gold standard of dry combustion, the measurement of soil organic carbon and soil inorganic carbon, bulk density, moisture, porosity and compaction. I'll repeat that if you want.
Thank you.
I don't know if I can remember it. Soil sensor is a carbon sensor that is in field, which produces on-demand data for, I forgot bulk density, for soil organic carbon, soil inorganic carbon, bulk density, compaction, porosity, and soil inorganic carbon. Did I say that? Yeah. Moisture. I need help. This has been done by an American university in lab, and it has been the intellectual property has been transferred to a company here in West Australia, which is owned by myself and friends. And we own it's not a license, we own the intellectual property totally. And it's being developed by a group here called Access Technology in partnership with Sensor C. Access Tech has a display out the front there, which you may have seen, in which you'll see a prototype of that carbon sensor. The issue of going from lab to in-field probe involves a few bits of difficult challenge, and this group, CEO Wes Lawrence, is an Osmond Park-based brilliant group of people. We've looked around the world at many, many organisations, and we've concluded Osmond Park is the centre of the universe. And we've found it's truly remarkable. If anyone's interested in knowing more about, okay, I'll just stop a second on carbon is everyone's buzzword now, and everyone wants to know carbon. The big issue, if you read a lot about carbon, is measurement. There's a lot of trickery. The minister said less than virtuous. I had to laugh myself on that one. There's less than virtuous people in this carbon world. Fran Hoyle, I don't know if you hear Fran? Yeah. Fran knows, every time I say to Fran, can you tell us about carbon? It's too complex. There is so much complexity to it, George, you can't pin it down to one 30-second soundbite. And I think that says heaps about how the market misunderstands carbon markets. They just grab whatever they can. They're always predictive models. They always involve near-infrared technology. They always involve modelling. And at the end of the day, somehow the guy putting it all together makes a lot of money, the farmer makes none, and the consumer's not sure what they get at the end of the day. That may be a little unfair, but I'm following on what the minister said, is they're less than virtuous, a lot of these people. So what we tried to do was to find a sensor that would break all of that. If you've got objective measurement of carbon, and you can do it on demand, and as Len Abbott's always telling me, the soil is never static, George. You can't say anything about the soil at any time about anything. It's always on the move. and it's like quantum mechanical theory. It's not there until you observe it. It's rather unusual, and I don't think the subtleties and the nuances of that are grasped entirely by the carbon traders. So what we hope to do is disrupt all of that by saying we can measure this, and we can measure cycles, and we can come back and measure today, tomorrow, an hour's time, a week's time, and we can measure anywhere we want to put this probe. So watch this space. This is still under development. It hasn't finished yet, but by the end of Q1, I'm told by certain people in the room, we should have the prototype ready to show people. This is more about the carbon sensor. Oh, there's my list. Oh, God. Yeah, so the next one on the list, as you see down the very bottom there, is soil nitrogen. Another complex area. There's a group called Terralytic that measures nitrogen with a sensor at the moment. I understand they measure a very, very small part of the nitrogen cycle. They have predictability modelling that tells you, this is what your nitrogen looks like over your farm. But again, predictability models aren't things that you'd want to be playing around with if you're paying $1,300 a tonne for DAP. You'd want to have more accuracy. So that's what we're going to be moving into. This is the gentleman, Wes Lawrence's company, Data and Device Solutions for Farmers and Agribusiness in Osborne Park. These guys recently won a contract against international software smart people like Hitachi, etc., awarded a great accolade by the federal government only 2 weeks ago, I think. Not public yet, okay. I'm not going to say any more about that. Just delete that last bit. You never told me it wasn't public. Yes, we'll move on from there. Here we have am I allowed to tell them this? Yep. This is what they do. Apparently we're not allowed to tell you. So data measurement and management is fundamental to what they do, and we've managed to put all of this, as we were originally speaking at the beginning of this chat, of custodian agriculture being a technology-driven framework for farming, food and beverage sustainability, and talking about the food and beverage value chain. So I've explained a little bit about the business my family are in and what I've been doing in research, and I've been thinking, how the hell can you make all of this work so that the value chain is supported at every level, rather than some guys make a lot, some guys make nothing, the farmer's left holding the bag. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes wrong. You have to be rich to do this sort of shit because no one else will fund it. Now, I was rich once, but I'm a lot less rich today. How do you make a small fortune? Start with a large one. So you've got to have a lot of commitment to do this stuff. And it's not funded by, it's a lot easier to pull down a forest than it is to protect a forest. That's regrettably the way things work in the world. And so someone had to put up the money, and I just kept on paying for stuff until I ran out of money. We've now got a position where we, I see we've lost the NT off management, and I don't know how that happened. We now data platform which monetized. And I'll run this through quickly. I don't know how much time I've got. 1 minute or less. So in the measurement area, you see Sensor C and Access Tech. In the management area, you see Access Stream, which is a part of the same company. And it's solving the challenges of disparate and fragmented data. In the metrics area, you see the global farm metrics, which I've discussed a little bit earlier. There are issues regarding ESG, sustainability, natural capital accounting. There are so many, there's thousands and thousands of people trying to crack this at the moment, but farm metric is because it's been adopted by the UK government, it's been adopted who know better than me. And we've managed to work our whole data platform around supporting this framework. The method, solving the challenge of how to turn the dial on sustainability. So like, okay, now we know what our sustainability metrics are. How can we change things? How can we get better productivity, better carbon, better this? Well, there are some methodology, and that era, soil metrics comes from that 30-year company I referred to earlier, which has 30,000 hectares, 4 years trials and those results. And this is probably the first public forum we've ever been to show this for the first time. So there'll be more information on this. The website is currently being worked on, and a whole bunch of people are doing a lot of stuff to get this thing rolling. And monetize, the last bit, custodian agriculture. Its purpose is, at the end of the day, and hope this is the dream, that a farmer does not have to pay for objective measurement of his soil health conditions, including carbon, soil organic carbon, soil inorganic carbon, bulk density, blah, blah. The finance company says, you know, we'll pay for this thing to be put in the ground. We'll make sure that at the end of the day that the consumer is being taken. The farmer can't to take on that sort of. Carbon price will be $200. I'll close on this one point. The Federal Minister for Ag paid $15 million to find a carbon measurement that would decrease the current price per hectare from $30 averaged to $3. We think we've got that. Thank you.
George, are you up for a question? Is there anyone who would like to ask George a question? Thank you, Jennifer. Just one. That'd be great.
We think it's $3 now if we get this, all the things that we've done correct. But that's a big if, because I don't know, you guys are in research to understand how that works. Keep spending money and get nowhere. But we've got ourselves in a very, very happy position where we think we can make that $3 work.
Thank you. Once again, put your hands together for George Kalis. Indeed, very appreciative of his presentation and investment in soil. I'd like to welcome Lorena Cortez, a master's student from Curtin University. Please bear with us, and I tell you, that cake is certainly worth waiting for. So, Lorena, please, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, my name is Lorena Cortez. My accent can tell I'm from Colombia. I don't want to lie, it's a little bit overwhelming for me to be here surrounded for so many professional and expertise in the topic, because I'm brand new. Thanks to Beck, my teacher, I decided to go this path. It is an honor to be here. In my opinion, about the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respect to the elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Also, I would like to thank the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, Soil Science Australia, and Soil West for organizing this event. As many of you know, currently the world is facing many challenges to meet food demands. And as the global population continues to grow, which is expected to reach 10 billion people by 2050, such challenges will be harder to address. And if we add to the question all the current environmental issues like global warming, water pollution, and deforestation, it becomes even more harder to address all these issues that have hampered and limited food production. And while we're trying to feed the global population, the current agriculture models, particularly the livestock industry, continue to negatively impact the environmental because they emit greenhouse gases, causes land degradation, and have led to animal extinctions. Therefore, protecting and conserving the environment and our resources, like a soil, is and should be at the forefront of the government policies, business, and communities. Many of you in this room can appreciate and understand the value of soils, and therefore we agree that taking care of our soils will be part of focus. But for some of you who are not fully aware of the importance of this natural resource, I would like to explain why preserving our soils matter. Soils, along with water and air, are the vessels on life. Soils not only provide 90% of the food, but also support a series of ecosystem functions, services, such as regulation of pollution, including greenhouse emission, the storage of carbon and water, as well as other supporting and cultural services. Therefore, healthy soils are essential for food security, environmental sustainability, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. It's unquestionable that protecting and conserving our soils will bring economic, environmental, and social benefits for future generations. Soil scientists have described soils as the skin of the living world, vital but thin, fragile and easily damageable, and I couldn't agree more. Worldwide, we have been depleting and degrading our soils. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations estimates that 33% of our soils are degraded, primarily for erosion, loss of fertility, salinization, and acidification. The ways in which we are damaging our soils are diverse, and a fundamental factor in this problem is the modern agriculture industry that uses excessive chemicals, fertilizers, and pesticides, and also destroy natural habitats and forests. It's been suggested that every 5 seconds, a soil area of one soccer field is eroded. For you, my Australian colleagues, this is the equivalent of losing soil in half a foot of bulk every 5 seconds. The global trend also applies to Australia, where about 75% of agricultural soils experience some kind of constraint, such as low water and nutrient holding capacity, acidity, alkalinity, and compactation. For instance, and according to Professor Peter Kanowski and Dr. Neil Mackenzie, it's expected that dry land salinity will be increased from 5.7 million hectares to 17 million hectares by 2050. On top of that, the management and protection of soils in Australia are complex for 2 main reasons. One, Australian soils are developed in a strong weather landscapes and differ considerably from the soils found in Europe and the Americas. Therefore, applying the farming methods shouldn't and cannot be used here. In fact, some of the land issues that Australia faces today are due to the repeated attempts to implement unsuitable farm practices. And second, how about Australia and how diverse climate and landscape from tropics to alpine regions and even Mediterranean zones require plenty and continued research of soils. For instance, we don't have temporal and soil data, and there is no soil monitoring network in Australia, which limits the knowledge of the extent and impact of so many soil constraints across the country. I hope that you can see that taking care of our soils is the key to life and sustainability. However, there is still much to learn about soils, their complex composition and behaviors, so that we can better manage them and preserve them for the future generations. A better understanding of the soils needs both fundamental and applied research. And I believe one of the focus of this research should be the development of cost-effective, easy to implement, and reliable tools and equipment to measure soil properties that can also provide faster results in situ. An example of this tool is proximal and remote sensing. And why I believe this strategy could improve soil management and protection? As physicist Lord Kelvin said, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. Moreover, we need to make some changes in our agricultural models and implement strategies more suitable for the Australian landscape that at the same time are more ecological friendly, such as the case of conservation agriculture, where is adopting non-tiller farming system. In my opinion, there are two key elements in the future of soil science. The first one is to recognize and include the knowledge of indigenous communities around the world. Trivia fact, even though indigenous communities only constitute 5% of the world population and their traditional territories cover just 20% of the worldland area, these areas possess about 80% of the world's biodiversity. For instance, Colombia has a large number of indigenous communities, and like in Australia, these communities have been the essential keepers of the environment and natural resources. It is also important to keep in mind that indigenous agricultural practices are resilient, and over the centuries, their techniques have adapted to extreme environments. This means that their knowledge is key to addressing environmental and food security challenges. The second element in the future of soil science is providing more education to farmers, business people, policymakers, and especially the general population about the importance of the soil and strategies to protect it, while making soil science careers more attractive to younger people. However, I acknowledge that over the last decade, the Australian government, institutions, and universities have been working on increased awareness, but more needs to be done, including encouraging new students to enroll into master and PhD degrees in soil science. I believe people like me, younger scientists, need to become active advocates and spokespersons to increase awareness about the value of our soils and encourage younger students to have careers in this field. In addition, the government and education institutes need to put in place strategies to increase the enrollment rates. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much, Lorena. You've set the challenge. Young scientists need to become active advocates and spokespersons, and also to uptake the baton for soil research. I'd like to invite Henry Small up, tell us a little bit about Soil Science Australia. Henry will also have the opportunity to cut the cake a little bit later, so off you go, Henry.
Thank you. How we go? We just
push the button.
Next one.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. I'm going to talk about Soil Science Australia. Soil Science Australia serves as the peak body for soil scientists across Australia. It seeks to advance soil science in our communities, especially our agricultural sector. I want to go back to the theme of World Soils Day, halt soil salinisation. Now, when you read the preamble, it talks about soil salinity and also sodification or soil sodicity. Both those things, both those constraints are linked, and they are our major constraints. Now, both are inherent or exacerbated by saline groundwater and irrigation when we use high sodium water. Now, they're obviously negative constraints. The theme is highly relevant to Western Australia because we're in a semi-arid environment and our dominant soils are sodic. To tackle these problems, we have to ask the question, do we know what saline and sodic soils look like? Are we collecting the right data? Do we know where landscape? Can we map their extent? What's the answer to that? maybe, no, no, no. I studied environmental science at Murdoch back in 19. Mulvaney talk about. That we just keep repeating the same thing. You know, the real. Of course it's real, like climate change. The environment. Why? Why do we slowly react to degradation? Now, and people don't like looking at this, but we've got salinity in our land since Chernobyl, and there's 2,600 square kilometres is a no-go zone. And in our state alone, there's 10,000 square kilometres of land that's now non-arable. And you can say, oh, you can't compare the two. But who wants to live on a saline flat or scratch a living out of it? Now, Soil Science Australia, what does it do? Soil Science Australia recommends the use of national standards. And these are essential for communication, training, education, accreditation, and good professional practice. We've got the Soil Field Handbook, the guidelines for surveying soils and land resources, and the Australian Soil Classification System. Soil Science Australia also provides training in soil description and soil classification. We also have an accreditation scheme for researchers and land consultants so that they can gain recognition as being certified professional soil scientists. As people have mentioned, and why? Why is that? Because there is a gap in knowledge, and we've got to address that. Now, Soil Science Australia encourages all jurisdictions to adopt the national standards, and in particular the Australian Soil Classification System. The Australian Soil Classification System, or ASC, is based on on identifying soil pedological development and subsoil constraints, such as salinity and sodicity. It's also better at recognising soil characteristics linked to biological processes. Now, you can't talk about soils without some pictures of soils, so I thought I'll add a few in. To understand soils and their limitations, we have to understand how they're formed. Soil scientists recognise that soil formation processes are driven by an interlink of 5 major material, topography, time, biology, and that includes man. Soils are dynamic. For example, as you can see, here on the left is a river, and on the right, that's a Kununurra cracking clay. It takes time, about 15,000 years. We need the right climate, semi-arid monsoonal. We need the right topography, seasonally flooded alluvial plain, and most importantly, organisms, macro and microorganisms. Under the right conditions, that's what you get. A non-structured alluvium to a well-structured cracking clay, which is versatile, resilient. Digital soils mapping. Soil Science Australia also supports the development of new technologies like digital soils mapping. Let me just get in line with this. A lot of people see this as the future in soils mapping because we haven't got enough soil scientists. And that's true because there's been a lack of soil communication and study in the last 40 years. Now, the beauty of digital soils mapping is that it takes good soil point data and marries that with remotely sensed data that reflects the soil forming factors. So hopefully in the near future we can use this technology to map out and identify areas that are saline and areas that are sodic. On the home front, today's conferences and workshops and the annual Buja lecture, a strong focus on providing training courses for up and coming soil, agriculture and environmental scientists. We provide training in soil classification using the Australian soil classification system. And we also send teams of students to the annual Soil Science Australia soil judging competition. Lorena was one of our star competitors, and we came second out of a field of 9 other universities. As I mentioned before, ASC is based on the recognition of pedagogical processes, which is strongly linked to biology. Where to next? Obviously, there needs to be more research on the main driver of crop production, the biotic factor. Phil Mulvaney said, and rightly so, that we have to get management systems which encourage more living roots into our agricultural landscapes. I'd like to point out we already have good management practices. All we have to do is apply them to our present systems. Now, I'm going to conclude it there, but I have to just mention Soil Science Australia will be having its AGM at 2 p.m. this afternoon, and it's going to be held at the Austin Lecture Hall in the Arts Building here. So, you're encouraged to come along. If you want to join Soil Science Australia, please visit our website, and all members can nominate for positions on the committee. We need a few new members, especially a treasurer. Okay, thanks, Tim.
Yes, I've been a federal president as well as currently the Vice President of Soil Science Australia, and it's a great organisation to be a part of because it looks beyond the perspective of just government, and so it comes at that point where I'm really wrapping us up here now to really kind of explain that the field of soil science is a broad church. So it's great to see so many people engaged and supporting our soil landscape systems, studying and learning more about soil life cycle interaction everybody for coming. But once again, this event has been recorded, so if you felt like you missed anything, you'll be able to go back and track that. So I'd like to thank everybody for your support today. These are indeed exciting times for soil. And on that note, I'd like you to put your hands together to thank the speakers preceding. Thank you to the Department of Primary Industries for the funding of the event, and for Soil Science Australia and Soils West in co-hosting. I would like to invite you to please make your way out to the lower colonnade, which is to the right there, and where Henry Smolenski and Soil Day cake, of which I tell you, it's a monster of a cupcake. I thought they were going to be like little cupcakes, but they're massive. And each one represents something to do with soil. Gravel on top, chocolate brown, Maltesers. Please take a cake with you. We don't want to take them home with us. Thank you. Thank you.